So the Apostle Paul, up until this point, has spent 3 chapters really diagnosing the human race. Romans chapter 1, Romans chapter 2, Romans chapter 3. Paul, in those chapters, has an agenda, and his agenda is to diagnose everyone with the same disease. He doesn't leave any loopholes or back doors open. He levels the human race by diagnosing all of humanity, and he makes the point in those 3 chapters that no one is righteous. Everyone is guilty. Moral people are guilty, and immoral people are guilty. Rule keepers are guilty and rule breakers are guilty. Religious people are guilty and irreligious people are guilty. All are guilty. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's what Paul intends to do. That's what Paul intends for us to hear, all of us to hear, as he makes his way, as he pens Romans chapters 1, 2, and 3. But beginning in chapter 4, he moves from the diagnosis section into the deliverance section. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that Romans really can be divided into 3 parts. Romans chapter 1, 2, and 3 is the diagnosis section where he diagnoses the human race with the same disease. And then chapters 4 through 11 is really the deliverance section where Paul just waxes eloquent about the radicality of God's one-way love for sinners like you and me. And then beginning in chapter 12, he really enters into what I call the descriptive section. What does life begin to look like? He begins to describe what life starts looking like for those who have been radically set free. It's not a life of taking, it's a life of giving. It's not a life of climbing to get to the top, but a life on the bottom. It's not a theology of glory, but it's a theology of the cross. It's a theology that looks at our neighbor and says, everything I need in Christ I already have. Therefore, I am free to give everything to you without needing anything from you. He describes that beginning in Romans chapter 12. But in chapter 4, he moves from the diagnosis section into the deliverance section. And we're supposed to come to the end of chapter 3 and feel the weight of our hopelessness. I mean, we're supposed to get to the end of chapter 3 and feel like, oh my gosh, there is absolutely no hope. If everything the Apostle Paul said is true here in Romans 1, 2, and 3, I'm screwed. I mean, I have no hope in this world or the next. If this is true, I'm in big trouble. And we're supposed to feel the weight of condemnation. We're supposed to feel the hammer of God coming down and announcing that all of us are guilty and we have no hope inside of ourselves. That's the way we're supposed to feel. It's very, very intentional by Paul. And it's intentional because Paul knows something that seems simple, but in reality is deeply profound, and it's this. The good news of God's grace only makes sense to people who have nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. People who have completely run out of options. And so in Romans 1, 2, and 3, Paul eliminates options. He basically says all of your self-salvation projects are futile. There is nothing you can do. Your problem is so much bigger than you think it is. You think your problem is simply a relationship. You think your problem is simply a rebellious teenager. You think your problem is financial. You think your problem is emotional. You think your problem is mental. You think those things that plague you each and every day are your biggest problem. Paul says in Romans 1, 2, and 3, trust me, it's infinitely bigger than that. Infinitely bigger than that. Some of these smaller things you may be able to fix. Some of these smaller things that plague you, you may grow out of one day. If you just live long enough, they may go away. But there is a problem so much infinitely bigger than anything you can do anything about, and therefore it requires outside help. It requires divine intervention. It doesn't simply require the intervention of a human doctor or the intervention of friends and family members. It requires divine intervention, intervention from above, intervention that comes down to us and does something for us that we nor anybody else in this world can do for ourselves. So Paul, beginning in Romans chapter 4, dives right into the deepest touch point, not only of the Christian faith, but of human existence, the issue of justification. Now, I know that sounds like an overstatement. This is the deepest touch point of human existence, the issue of justification. I mean, isn't justification simply a theological word and a theological category that, ivory tower scholars who know nothing about the real world argue about and debate about? What does the issue of justification have to do with my life lived on the ground? And even if you can convince me that it has something to do with my life, you're trying to convince me that it is the deepest touch point of human existence? No way. No way that the issue of justification, which may not even be a word that's familiar to you, is the deepest touch point of your life, the deepest touch point of human existence. But let me try to prove to you that it is. The subject of justification is not simply a theological issue. It's a functional issue. It's not simply a theological or doctrinal issue. It's a life issue. It's a practical issue. It's a functional issue. Because the haunting question, whether you realize this or not, whether you believe this or not, or realize this about yourself or not, the haunting question of all of our lives, that question that lurks underneath all of our questions, is simply this: how can I be justified? You may have never asked yourself that question, but underneath all of the questions you do ask, underneath all of the things you do pursue, underneath all of your dreams and ambitions, underneath all of your hopes and all of your fears, all of them, that's not an overstatement, all of them, is the haunting question: how can I be justified? What must I do, or who must I become in order to ensure that the ultimate grade on my life is a passing one? What must I do? Or who must I become in order to ensure that the ultimate grade on my life is a passing one? Or, to put it negatively, what can I do to guarantee that I won't be judged a failure? Stay out of trouble, find my soulmate, generate a good reputation, lose weight. What must I do to guarantee that I won't be judged a failure? We work hard to escape a failing grade in life by trying to look good, be good, make sure that we get in with the right people so that we can end up in the right places in life. These are the things that drive us. These are the things that govern us, both consciously and unconsciously. These are the things that are underneath all of our pursuits, all of the things that occupy our heart and our mind. As I mentioned on Friday night at the conference, you don't have to believe in justification by works as a doctrine to believe in justification by works as a practice. That's important to understand. Because we Protestants are very, as I mentioned Friday night, proud of the fact that unlike those nasty Roman Catholics, we don't believe in justification by works. We believe in justification by grace alone, through faith alone, and the finished work of Christ alone, so that God alone gets the glory. And we find that in Scripture alone, okay? The 5 solas of the Protestant Reformation. We champion those things, we confess those things, we profess those things, and then we think we're better than all of the nasty other people out there who actually believe that justification happens by works. Our right standing with God happens as a result of what we do. The fact of the matter is, every single human being is addicted to justification by works. Every single one of us. You don't have to believe in justification by works doctrinally to believe in justification by works practically. We are obsessed with activity. What we do and accomplish, we think, determines who we are, our worth, our value. In other words, our default setting is justification by doing. No one has to teach us this stuff. The gospel is something we have to hear and be taught. But this law that's written on our hearts, which says, be perfect, no one has to teach us that stuff. I mean, that's Paul says, as we looked at a few weeks ago in Romans 1. I mean, this is by virtue of the fact that every single one of us is made in the image of God. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Do this and live. That's written on our hearts. In fact, Paul says in Romans chapter 1 that you don't even have to be a believer in God for you at some level to acknowledge that right is right and wrong is wrong and truth is true and falsehood is false. And I mean, these are things that by virtue of our being made in the image of God, we just know because we're human. We just know. And so we just, our default mode, our natural default mode as human beings is justification by doing. Which is why I so appreciate what David Zoll said yesterday when he said, our problem is not that people aren't doing anything. I mean, there are just some people in the church who are like, you can't say this stuff because you gotta constantly tell people what they need to be doing. I'm like, listen, do you really think the problem in America is a lack of activity? That there aren't enough people running themselves ragged, doing things for themselves, doing things for God, trying to justify their existence and validate themselves by all of the things they do? That's the problem. That's the problem. Not to mention that this whole justification by doing is something, as I said a second ago, that is inherent because we're fallen people. Ever since Genesis chapter 3, we've been addicted to this stuff. I want to be God. I will rescue myself. I will justify myself. I will save myself through all of the things that I do and through the pursuits that I go after and all of these things. And so the gospel is supernatural. It's something that we must hear because what comes natural is justification by doing. I've told you this before, that while the law offends us because it tells us what to do, grace offends us even more because it tells us that there's nothing we can do. And if there's anything that we hate worse than being told what to do, it's being told that there's nothing we can do. That all has been done. That we are weak and incapable, and therefore someone other than us had to come and do for us what we could never do for ourselves. We hate the law. I mean, I hate speed limit, okay? I don't care about speed limit. I don't mind the speed limit, like mind it meaning pay attention to it. I do mind it in the other way, totally mind it. I've told someone the other day, I said, one of the reasons that I confess before my church that I cannot drive slow and I don't pay attention to the speed limit is so that when I cut them off in traffic, they won't be surprised. Like, there goes my pastor, okay? When you confess your sins publicly, people aren't surprised when they find out you're a train wreck. So I make it a point to tell the sweet, patient, loving, unconditional people here at Coral Ridge my sins so that they won't be, number one, they won't put me up on a pedestal. Number two, they won't be surprised when I disappoint them and cut them off in traffic as I'm trying to outrun the police officers that are chasing me. But the law offends us. No one likes being told what to do. I mean, no one likes being told what to do. If you don't think that's true, just literally watch a toddler for 2 seconds. You don't have to teach people this stuff. I mean, Kim and I have 3 kids, and it was amazing to me that when they were small, they would find dangerous things to play with. And the more you would say, don't play with dangerous things, the more they wanted the dangerous thing, and the more sneaky they became trying to obtain the dangerous thing, whatever it was. So when Paul says the law incites rebellion, we don't even have to read that in the Bible to know it's true. All you have to do is have children. All you have to do is know your own heart and know that when someone tells us what to do, we don't like it, but there is something we don't like more. And it's when we're told that there's nothing we can do, that it's already been done, that we can't do anything, that we can't earn anything. And what's even more offensive is when we realize that it was our doing that got us into this mess. I mean, it's really where Paul is going here. It's not only that you can't do anything or earn anything, but on the flip side, it's your doing that got you into this mess. So not only is it foolish to bank on your doing to get you out, it was your doing that got you in. Whether you look to the left or to the right, doing is bad news for you. Your doing is bad news. But as is always the case, all of our self-rescue missions experientially eclipse the only rescue mission that can set us free from this self-imposed slavery. And this is self-imposed slavery. This is Adam and Eve's cosmic rebellion against God in the Garden of Eden. Self-imposed slavery. Slavery that continues to champion in our hearts, do more, try harder. Do more, try harder. Do this and live. Do this and live. And we believe that, and so we try to do. But what we find is that as we try and do, we tangle ourselves up in a deeper and deeper mess. And instead of finding life at the end of our doing, we find death at the end of our doing. So Paul, addressing justification, is not simply doctrinal, okay? Our life depends on this. Our life depends on it. Your freedom depends on it. Paul shows here how God and God alone can set us free from the prison of justification by works by going back to a very familiar Old Testament story. A story that his readers would have been very familiar with, a story that I'm sure if you grew up in church, you're familiar with. God comes to Abraham, and this happens in Genesis chapter 17. In verses 15 and 16 of Genesis 17, God promises that he's going to give a son to Abraham and Sarah, and from this child will become a great nation. Abraham's 100. Okay, God had made this promise when Abraham was much younger and Sarah was much younger. And he says, Abraham, look up into the sky. See all the stars? I am going to make a nation out of you that will be more numerous than all the stars in the sky. And he said, I'm going to give you a child. And through that child, I'm going to build an empire. And so, Abraham and Sarah try to have children. Nothing. And Abraham, I'm sure in the quietness and in the dark moments, started to wonder at times, did I hear from God? Was this wishful thinking? I mean, what was going on? Much like all of us do when God makes these stunning promises in the Bible and we confront something in life that seems impossible and we think to ourselves, did God really promise that he would work all things out for my good and his glory? Because it doesn't seem like that right now. It seems like he's out to get me. I mean, it just seems like all of the promises, the good promises that God has made to people like me, he's backing out on. He's breaking. I mean, we experience something painful, something difficult in life, and the promises of God that we're familiar with in the Bible come back to us in our minds, in our hearts, and we begin thinking, is that true? Well, I'm sure at certain times Abraham wondered himself. I mean, is this true? Life happens, he gets older, and Paul makes it clear here, and also back in Genesis, it's clear that God makes this promise. Abraham now is 100 years old. His wife is roughly 90 years old, and she's barren. She can't have children. In verse 17, Genesis, it says Abraham fell on his face and laughed because he heard the impossibility of the promise. Seriously? That? God, I don't know if you've been paying attention or, since you're above and beyond time, maybe you're not aware of the fact that since you made your promise, I've gotten a lot older. My wife's gotten a lot older. And we've tried. Trust me, we've tried. And nothing. Which leads me to believe, God, that she's barren. You promised to give us a child. You promised that you were going to build a great nation from me. And now I'm 100. My wife is 90 and barren. We don't even have one measly kid. Are you crazy? I mean, what are you thinking? I mean, can you imagine at some point Abraham getting frustrated with God? Have you ever been frustrated with God? I have. I am regularly, especially when I hit red lights on my way to and from. I have a driving issue, as you can tell, I hit a car the other night. Hit a car. It wasn't a bad accident. I was actually at a red light, and I was a safe distance from the car in front of me. And I was looking down at my phone and texting or something. And apparently, don't text and drive, children. Apparently, my foot was easing off the brake, and there was just this boom. And I look up, and of course, it has to be some humongo pickup truck with one of those, what do you hook those, hitch? That was like 18 feet long and 600 pounds that could have gone right through my entire car and out the back. And the guy didn't even budge. He just sat in his car. It's like, this happens all the time. I promise you, he said that to me. I got out of my car and I said, oh my gosh, man, I'm so sorry. I said, I looked on the back of your car, there's nothing. He was just like, happens all the time, man. I ain't worried about it. I swear. I promise you, this is verbatim. Those were his words. So I look at my car and it's like cracked in the front. Thank God it's a lease. I have a driving problem. You ever face things in life that cause you to doubt God's promise and therefore generate frustration with God? I do. And I can only imagine Abraham at some point started wondering, was it really God I heard from? And is this a promise-keeping God? Is this a God who keeps his promises? Or is this a God who plays games? Is this a God who keeps his promises, or is this simply a God who plays games? I'm 100, she's 90 and barren. How can we possibly have a son? It is humanly impossible. And Paul actually intensifies this in Romans chapter 4 and says that because they're old and barren, they are described as dead. Dead. The ESV translates this as barren, but the Greek word literally means death or deadness. See what God is setting up here? Don't tell me the Old Testament doesn't point us to Jesus. Out of death comes life. God is setting the stage for a huge picture of what he will one day do cosmically, universally, bringing life out of death, making all things new. As my friend Scotty Smith says, not making all new things, making all things new, bringing life out of death. God is setting the stage for that. The point is that the body of Abraham and the womb of Sarah are lifeless, and so a biological child is impossible. This is the illustration Paul uses in Romans 4 to say, let me tell you about justification. Let's go back to Genesis. Let's talk about human impossibility. Let's talk about what is impossible for you to do. Let's talk about that. Let me show you, because in Romans 1, 2, and 3, he's given us this terrible verdict that we are not only unrighteous, we're dead. So it only makes sense that if he is going to announce The radicality of justification and what that means, not only theologically, but practically, he's going to start with a story like this. Let me tell you about life and death, or more specifically, let me tell you about life out of death. It is always the impossible that God promises. That's what Paul wants us to know. It's always the impossible. Remember that, I don't remember which Mission Impossible it was. I think there's been 14 of them. Maybe it was Mission Impossible 2. Where's Nick? Is he back there? Was it number 2? Yes. Okay, Mission Impossible number 2. Anthony Hopkins is the guy who is announcing to Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise, that he wants him to go on this mission. And as he's explaining the mission, Tom Cruise's character, Ethan Hunt, says, "This is kind of crazy." And Anthony Hopkins says, "Is this difficult? Does this sound difficult?" And he says, "Very." And he said, "Just remember, Ethan, this is not mission difficult. This is mission impossible." And for whatever reason, we're okay with mission difficult. There's something actually inside of us that gets up for mission difficult, you know? Climb the highest mountain, cross the widest sea, stack the odds against me, and let me show you what I got. Mission difficult is something that we embrace. Mission difficult is something that we like. I mean, we like to be challenged so that we can rise to the challenge and show what we're made of. We like this stuff. Mission impossible, on the other hand, you can't do anything. You can't earn anything. You can't win anything because you're dead. It's mission impossible. There is only one who can actually pull off mission impossible. And God, through Paul, sets the stage here by showing that he only promises the impossible. He promises life where there is only death. God always works out of the opposite, creating out of nothing. The Bible starts that way. How do we miss this? The Bible starts that way. I mean, there was nothing. God created ex nihilo, out of nothing. Wasn't like there was some primordial soup that God had something to work with. There was nothing. Can you imagine nothing? You can't. Someone once defined nothing as that which rocks think about. It's the best philosophical definition of nothing you can come up with. If you say, I can think of nothing, let me close my eyes. No, you're thinking about darkness. I don't know what you're thinking about. When you close your eyes, you're thinking about other stuff. I mean, nothing is impossible to think about. Because as soon as you start thinking about it, you're doing something. I mean, you think about the impossibility of nothing. I mean, these are the odds that God works with. Okay? Nothing, impossibilities. He leaves no room here whatsoever for God will come 99% of the way if you come 1% of the way. God helps those who help themselves is not a verse in the Bible. Okay? It's not a verse in the Bible. It is not, God helps those who help themselves. It's God raises the dead. It's God justifies the ungodly. God brings something out of nothing. He's always doing this. He's always creating out of nothing. He's always bringing life out of death. He's always justifying the ungodly because ungodly people are all that there are. I like the way my friend John O'Linebaugh puts it. Nothingness, this is such a great quote. Nothingness, death, and sin are the site at which God utters a generative counterstatement. Creation, life, salvation. Where does God do his stuff? Does God do his stuff in the realm of competency and strength and beauty and goodness and morality and power? That's not what Paul says. That's not where Paul says God does his stuff. That's not where God works. God works with nothing, death, and ungodliness. That's what he works with. God's impossible promise is intended to destroy faith in ourselves and deliver to us faith in God. That's what his impossible promise is intended to accomplish. Faith involves two confessions. Two confessions. I can't, God can. That's really what faith involves. Two confessions. I can't, God can. And this forces us to face the fact that when it comes to the stuff that matters in our life, we can't do it. We can't make it on our own. We can't do it. The stuff that really matters in life, love and peace, those things that really matter to us are not things that we can create, but we try. We try so hard. We imagine that real security is a financial category, and so we try to save money or make money. We imagine that real peace is a social category, and so we try and save ourselves by becoming popular and reputable and influential. I love what Jim Carrey, the great comedic prophet of our time, once said when he said, "I wish everyone could experience being rich and famous so they would see it isn't the answer for anything." He sounds more Christian than lots of preachers. He really does. It's unbelievable. Be a much more entertaining preacher than lots of preachers, I can promise you that. I wish everyone could experience being rich and famous so they would see it isn't the answer for anything. Coming from a rich and famous guy. We imagine that love comes our way when we are worthy of it, so we work out and diet and try to make good first impressions and hide our flaws and all of those things. Why? Because we know that no one will love me for me. It's that famous line that you've heard me quote, I'm sure numerous times from Chris Rock, when people meet you for the first time, they're not meeting you, they're meeting your representative. They're meeting the person that you want them to think you are. I don't know if you were here yesterday morning to hear my very good friend David Zoll's talk. It was just off the chart good. He opened it with this. So funny. I don't know if you're familiar with The Onion, which is a satirical newspaper. This was the headline of an Onion article. Area child disappointed to learn that parents' love is unconditional. Okay? And this is the article. Saying he doesn't even feel like trying anymore, 8-year-old Max Bledsoe expressed his strong disappointment Monday after learning that his parents' love is unconditional. Quote, "I always thought they loved me because I'd actually earned it, but unfortunately, it turns out that their affection is apparently limitless," said a frustrated Bledsoe, wondering aloud why he was even trying to do well in school, learning how to play the piano, and always going to bed before 9 p.m., if his parents were just going to keep on loving him no matter what. "Look at me," he says. "I just wasted the last 3 years of my life trying to win their approval by being a good kid. And for what? To get the love that was coming to me anyway?" Bledsoe added that he envied his adopted younger brother who really does have to work for his parents' love. Okay? This is the way, the unconditionality of love is just something that not only is impossible to believe in, but frustrates us. We imagine that love comes our way when we are worthy of it. And so we do all of these things. We be good, we get good grades, we try to look good, we try to make the right friends, and we try to do all of these things to get love, and we try to give a good first impression and hide our flaws. We don't want anyone to really know us for who we really are, because if they did, they would never love us. We imagine that love comes our way when we're worthy of it, so we try to go out and get it. We imagine that we can find true happiness and meaning in life if our marriage is strong and our kids turn out okay, and then our marriage gets rocky or our kids spin out of control and we despair. So we try to do these things on our own all the time. And I love the way that Paul Tripp puts it when he asks this question: how is your present disappointment or discouragement a window on what has actually captured your heart? One way to see how addicted you are, how addicted I am to justification by works, is to begin examining your disappointments. Why are you disappointed? Examine, look into your discouragement, look into your despair, look into your grief, look into just the disappointments of life and go, why am I disappointed? Because it is in those places where we can identify the subtle ways in which we are trying to justify ourselves by our works. Functionally. Justify ourselves by what we can do, by who we can become, by what we can accomplish. We wear ourselves out trying to accomplish the impossible, getting for ourselves all of the things that only God can give. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Interestingly, Paul, when he describes the works of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit, you notice how he distinguishes those things? The works of the flesh, the fruit of the Spirit. These are things you can't get. These are things that can only be given. These are like the bizarro fruit of the Spirit over here. Remember, like Bizarro, Superman's like, Superman was clean cut and had everything going for him, and he was right, and Bizarro Superman couldn't fly straight, and he kind of looked like Superman, but he was crooked and had kind of a messed up face, and blah, blah, blah. The works of the flesh are like the bizarro fruit of the Spirit in every imaginable way. It's not only opposite virtues, but this one is freely given. This one we go out and try and get on our own. So these things, we wear ourselves out trying to accomplish the impossible, getting for ourselves all of the things that only God promises to give for free. We are natural-born do-it-yourselfers. We would rather know what we should do, yet God insists on telling us what He's done. And this is His point. The truth is, the only hope we have for ourselves is to give up hope in ourselves. That's it. The only hope we have for ourselves is to give up hope in ourselves. So, the gospel is the good news that Jesus has not only done for you what you could never do for yourself, and He has not only achieved for you what you could never achieve for yourself, and He not only gives you what you could never get for yourself, but He also undoes everything you've done to mess things up. The gospel is that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. The gospel declares that while we were at our worst, God gave us His best. The gospel is not humanity and it improved. The gospel is Christ and Him crucified. And from behind way too many pulpits in America, the sermons are nothing more and nothing less than divine self-help programs, because they have come to believe, for whatever reason, that Christianity is all about humanity and it improved. You can get that stuff outside the church. The history of philosophy proves that you can get that stuff outside the church. Tony Robbins can help you with that. He can, okay? Literally, Tony Robbins can help you with that. He's a smart guy, and if you're looking to figure out stuff about how you can be more successful in this area of your life or that area of your life, why do you even need to go to church? It's much different. Preachers have a different job description. And their job description is to diagnose and deliver sinners, period. Not to give some divine self-help manual so that you can go out. So all of that to say is, you clap when I'm at my angriest. That's concerning to me. You guys are angry people. I'm just kidding. The gospel is God gave us his best while we were at our worst. The Christian life is a love affair with an unlosable lover. Okay, we are clothed in an irremovable suit of forgiveness. We don't have to go out and try to buy love, earn peace. These are things that, try to achieve joy. These are things that are given for free. Jesus earned those things so that we could freely receive those things. Sinners like me and like you are the recipients of descending, no strings attached, one-way love. And so the gospel of grace is the announcement that all of the incomprehensible good news really is true. You are forever loved. You are forever vindicated. You are forever forgiven. Scorekeeping with God is over. You are justified. You are made righteous because of what Jesus has accomplished for you. So let me just conclude by reading Romans chapter 4, verse 7 and 8, where Paul quotes David. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord will not count his sin. Let's pray together.